have to. Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
Yes.
So I think firstly I must thank Pushpendra. It was a really tough, it's going to be a tough act to follow. And I think I'm truly blessed to have had him around at NID as a friend and fellow traveler. And I think there are many points that he raised which are going to somewhere also percolate into my conversation. So I think he set the narrative. Something that is common to both of us is Lucknow. For many years, though I was born in Lucknow, I never went back. It was a one-way journey. And when we got the opportunity to work on the airport there, it was a sort of like a homecoming of sorts to go back to your birthplace, which you have never really known. And I think there are many overlaps in some of the very profound ideas that he talked about and what we are going to discuss. So just a short film to begin with, and then we'll move forward. Wait, sorry. So we'll begin with a little bit of a digression into the theme for what we are looking at, the whole AI aspect, which also Pushpendra talked about. So really what we believe in is also something similar. We are quite old school in how we work. Our approach to creativity is all centered on the notion of human intelligence. And of course, the work that we do does involve some work with AI. And I think young people are trained in this idiom. But our own practice is to constantly go back to first principles and see how the mind-eye connect can be re-established. And of course, AI can be a reasonably potent tool, but we have to be careful how much we train AI. there is a certain degree of randomness in how even humans think. And I think the ability of AI to harness that randomness and use it in a more powerful way is something that we need to be, watchful about. So really, our approach is to constantly design with a human touch, go back to the primordial roots of how creativity started, and in that process, see design as a very people-centric kind of activity. Constantly go back to who it's for, why it is. Even Pushpendra talked about bringing in that element of empathy. Easy to talk about. Anybody who talks about design thinking is always talking about empathy. Easy to talk about, very difficult to practice in reality. Very difficult to understand what it really involves. Even in our daily lives, designers may apply a lot of empathy when they're working for clients, but do we apply it when we work with our children? Do we apply it at home with our families? It's something that's very core to design, but very difficult to preserve in our everyday actions. And of course, there is an element of what we let loose into the world when we design something. So there are many ingredients. I think this is again something that I'll go back to what Pushpendra was showing. A very deep, literary sort of heritage in what he's doing. He was, I think, mature beyond his age, even at NID, and a lot of the work that he wrote and did for Nagamandala and the other plays that he worked on were things that a lot of us didn't even understand at that point. It was a very deep literary foundation, but ultimately it has taken him somewhere, but he never lost the sense of humor. It's very easy to take things too seriously, but when you have that sense of humor, it's something that recharges you, invigorates you. We saw that even in Mr. Mehta's presentation. There's this, he's not taking it too seriously. It's a serious product. His business is obviously dependent on it, but he's having a lot of fun with it. So that's something we try and keep in everything that we do. Very quickly, the company that I work with, Incubus, it's now close to 30 years old, and it feels like a lot less, but time has this way of passing you by. And of course, this looks very complicated and colorful and interlinked, but I think the core of it is this element of bringing in surprise into our everyday existence, but also linking surprise with what is already inside us. Linking surprise to memory, linking surprise to storytelling. That's again something we try and do, and I think that's why I really loved what Pushpendra was saying. I'm feeling a little sad that I didn't spend more time with him at NID, and I hope I get the chance to reconnect. And so thanks, Sudhir, for bringing all of us together again. Pardon? So the kind of work that we do is very diverse. I'm trained as an industrial designer, started my journey designing products, and that is still something that is the foundation of what we do. But we've been fortunate to have grown beyond the core of industrial design and apply it in very diverse areas. And it's diverse in the form of being applicable to architectural spaces, to service environments, hotels, hospitals, banks, and so on, where service design kind of plays a role, and the human experience is very important. And I think this constantly gives us the opportunity to understand how people interact with their environment on a daily basis, where the environment keeps changing. Even if you're in a car and you go from A to B, there are so many different environments, there are so many different services that you interact with, but trying to go deeper into that and decoding that. So the two projects that I'm going to talk about today are how we look at the human experience in the context of aviation and airports. It's a relatively new area. Typically, airports have been built and run by the government. Now that they are in the private sector, I think there's an awareness that one can push the boundaries a little more. And bringing in that contextual element is something that a lot of clients are more conscious about. We'll start with the T3 opportunity. It's a very interesting story. The client's need was nothing to do with three-dimensionality, nothing to do with sculpture. They basically wanted to brand the airport. And like all good designers, we are taught the first principles, question the brief. And I think we had in our, it was again our good fortune that we had a client who let us question the brief. And we kind of stretched the brief to expand into not just the brand experience, not just the communication of what this company is all about, the company that's building this privately funded airport. It was India's first private sector airport, first and second more or less together. Hyderabad and Delhi, both GMR projects happened more or less simultaneously. Hyderabad was on its final stages and Delhi was just about starting. And what we found is that globally, not just in India, travel can be initially a very exciting thing. Our first flight is something we never sort of forget. When we are young, we love the sight of planes. You know, even today when I sit in an aircraft and it takes off, I think it's a magical experience that I'm participating in. That's something that is really the passion behind the process of taking a flight. But airports themselves, the destination, the place that we leave, they are often very banal, very boring, and also there is a sense of sameness. And globally, this is a problem. And I think a lot of us in India feel that because of our diversity, because of us being an amalgam of so many different cultures, we have the opportunity to create a sense of arrival, give people the sense that they've come to a place in India with all its richness, and basically make modern architecture come alive with a sense of Indianness. So this whole idea of communicating to a large public audience is a very challenging one also, because how much abstraction do you put into it? And it has to, at one level, be something everybody can understand. At another level, it has to be something that is intellectually stimulating. Every time you come there, you don't want the same message. You want something that will provoke you to think in a different way. So finding that balance is very tough. We still struggle with it. It's not easy. And really, the process that we typically follow is to understand what's cutting edge in airports across the world. Also understand the passenger journey. You know, in design, this is all about how do people get from one place to the other. So really understand each step in that journey in a very, very granular way and get into the emotions at each stage. And there is a sort of science behind it, and we kind of build on that science. And every airport is different, the journey is a little different, and the place is a little different. And even simple things that when are you more anxious? When are you a little relaxed? Is there something that is provoking a negative reaction? You also see a lot of people getting aggressive at the airport, people fighting with other people fighting with the staff that's trying to help you. Why does that happen? Because there is an element of uncertainty, insecurity, and being out of control. You don't control when the flight will take off. You don't control how much time security will take. There are a lot of ambiguities which people cannot process, and that causes them a lot of anxiety, and that anger is basically an outburst. It's a reaction to something that's disturbing them inside. So we have to be, again, very careful about why that's happening and understand at what stage do you communicate. And our playbook is all about trying to build a theme which is anchored in Indianness, especially when we are talking about people in India, people who are visiting India, tourists, and so on. And that's where the idea of bringing our crafts, our traditional skills alive come in. But of course, very often the scale is such, the kind of materials are such, the structural challenges, the safety challenges are such that those crafts cannot be deployed in the traditional way. We have to reinvent and reimagine them, but ensure that the people who are involved in those crafts are still getting rewarded and they are participants in that process. So really coming back to Delhi, the whole idea was anchored around the notion of expressive India. And of course, like any design project, it took many steps to get here. And we created these pixels which were drawn from the client's brand into something that could morph into a multitude of symbols, an iconographic system that could stand for expression in a very diverse way. So this kind of became the visual landscape. And there was also a sort of utilitarian layer which had to guide people where to go, help in the wayfinding aspect. So art, wayfinding, and the artistic or the three-dimensional expression all had to happen in the right place. It had to be choreographed so that they don't overlap and kind of give a consistent expression. Coming specifically to the mudras, they were not something that suddenly happened. It was an outcome of a lot of creative brainstorming into many different directions. We looked at, doors and windows from India. We looked at masks from different parts of India. We looked at expressions of India in many ways. And we also tried to look at contemporary expressions. We spoke to artists like Anish Kapoor and others. And we found that clients were having a lot of problem dealing with abstraction. So a lot of contemporary art may be very expressive for a designer. It may be absolutely stunning and iconic. But for the average passenger, it may not mean much. And they may not really carry a message back. So we had to balance that. And finally, the notion of the mudras evolved as a very, in a way, literal interpretation of what, India's traditional dance forms, yogic expressions, and practices, what they could come up with. So this is again where the balance between the craftsmanship of design and the actual three-dimensionality of using technology and so on became a part of it. And it had to go through many iterations before it could be distilled to become what it finally sort of emerged as a sort of solution. And so you can see there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of product design detailing, there's a lot of structural engineering. So I'm not the quote-unquote man who designed it, it's the outcome of a lot of people working in a very well-coordinated way. Again, to go back to what Pushpendra was saying, it was a production of a very large scale requiring motivated people sort of contributing to a common goal. And this was the final outcome. The statistics are quite amazing. And of course, there is an element that also became important from the client's perspective, that it became a symbol of the city. Today, even the Delhi government, even the airport, of course, and a lot of other people use it as a symbol of India, use it as a symbol of the city, because it is easy to understand. The abstraction is not in a zone which becomes too intellectual. And of course, this same process was repeated in other assets, which became a part of the visual landscape and the passenger journey. These are just a few of them. And of course, there was a team behind it. And I'll very quickly run you through a similar journey that we did at Lucknow. And this is that homecoming experience I was talking about. And it's again, one of those interesting things that happen in life. You get called back to where you belong or where you truly belong. And it was a beautiful process. Again, Pushpendra mentioned Muzaffar Ali. He was one of the people who was actually supposed to do it. And unfortunately, due to the political connotations of working with him, he did not get the chance. So we felt that it was probably a lost opportunity for the country to not have a genius like him do the project. And we had to at least raise our game to come at least at the fringes of what he would have done. And Muzaffar Ali is quite the Renaissance man, quite the genius. He's over 80 or 90 right now, but he works like a child. I've seen him work up close, and again, he's one of the most vibrant and inspiring people one can sort of see as a creative person. So again, many ideas around Lucknow, many inspirations around Lucknow. This is home territory for Pushpendra. But what we finally wanted to celebrate was the joy and the festivity that the city is known for, which actually sort of manifests in so many different ways. It is also the city of illusion. It is also the city of great food. It's the city of harmony. Syncretic harmony. Lucknow is a really beautiful place, and that's why it has such a deep literary tradition. And just a very short clip which was brought out when the project was launched. So, these projects need to be traditional and contemporary at the same time. And finding that balance and not getting lost in abstraction is a very important aspect. And whether it was the entry portals, and I think one thing which we always emphasize is that what may look good may also have a very deep design and engineering core. And this is something we love doing. We don't just like to do the skin. We spend a lot of time and effort working into the bones, the skeletal element that actually make these things come to life. So for us, design is about the experience. It's about the passenger in this case, but it's also about being robust, being easy to build, being cost effective, and all the other constraints that designers work with, we try and get into that in as much detail so that the final product really looks like the way we want it to. It doesn't get diluted during the whole process. And of course, this is what I was talking about, the human intelligence. The idea around the skylight, I'll just take another minute, was also to create a sense of diffusion in the light. If anybody's visited Lucknow, all the monuments, the traditional buildings, they have this filigree which allows light to come in a very special way. So we didn't want artificial light to destroy that character that the light in Lucknow, in its monuments, has. But we had to do it in a modern idiom, and we took inspiration from the rohu, which is the symbol of Lucknow, and kind of interpreted it. So there is abstraction here. You can see a fish somewhere, but we kind of took it to a much larger scale. And you can see the scale at which some of these ideas operate. They're really quite gigantic. And at the same time, we are supposed to control light through these. They have to be structurally sound, and they have to, of course, work at scale. And there were a lot of other elements inspired by the chicken curry, inspired by the geography, inspired by the monuments, and also inspired by the shairi, and illustrating the shairi and bringing that little sense of humor into the whole thing. So there was a little bit of transliteration of couplets, and saying things in a Lucknowi andaz. And I think discovering that was a great the joy of doing that and putting it in unexpected places. While you are being frisked, there's a humorous couplet over there. So when you are very stressed, there is something to diffuse it. And of course, this became a real this was not intended to be as important as it became, but this was really to celebrate the Firozabad craftspeople who can do this beautiful work in glass, but also talk about the multi-sensory aspect of Lucknow. There is a Phoolon ki Barish and there is a flower festival. These are very Lucknowi things. So we wanted people to discover it, also discover the craftspeople who sort of create all of this. And of course, like I mentioned, there's a lot of engineering behind the scenes. There are a lot of people involved. It is not one man's work. We always say it's a team effort. We also looked at all the textiles of Uttar Pradesh. We found people who were skilled craftspeople from Uttar Pradesh all over the country. In fact, some of these pictures were taken in Pune, where we found some craftsmen from UP working here and doing work which you can't even see in UP. And again, we had to work with textile designers, we had to work with structural designers. Very wide range of skills were brought to, even dyeing. So even though I'm trained as an industrial designer, I had to really get into how textiles are constructed. So there was a lot of rediscovery involved. And I'll just like to just go back to a picture. The picture that you see on the left, these are construction workers from Andhra Pradesh. They work for a company called NCC, and they just stood there looking at it for almost 45 minutes, looking at each and every element. And that is really what brings joy to these projects, that when people who are not trained in art and design, they start appreciating it, they start seeing it as a sort of message that is sort of calling them in. And in a way, this is a gateway to Lucknow. It welcomes passengers. It uses imagery that is not difficult to understand. But as you go deeper, there are a lot of details. There are a lot of intricate crafts which are sort of reinvented for this scale, for this large scale. And of course, even in this project, there were many people involved. And we love collaborating. We love working with different skills and working with designers. I think our real strong suit is to bring people together, very much like Pushpendra did at NID, brought people from every discipline. And not everybody is earning a lot from this, I must tell you. Everybody is just motivated to create something that is larger than themselves. And I think that ability to work as a team also gets noticed. And this, of course, gives us a lot of cheap thrills when people like Kriti Sanan and others and Manan Mahendra sort of applaud what we've done. So, this is the little sort of reward that we get at the end of the project. But for me personally, it's over, it's done, and we are kind of looking for what next and trying to reinvent ourselves. So we kind of try and build it right from scratch every time. So thank you, and thanks Sudhir for the opportunity.